This weekend, the third film in the Kingsman franchise dropped in theaters, so today we're going to stop and rank all three Kingsman films from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all three Kingsman films. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. With that said, let's get started. In last place, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, a big misfire, a series of bad ideas executed with lots of energy. At its core, I just feel like they took almost all the plot lines in the wrong direction. The movie kicks off by killing off almost all of the surviving cast members.
Say goodbye to the Kingsman.
Including a dog, and then it also decides to revive Harry, who was clearly dead, brings back Charlie, who was presumed dead and not very interesting, and promotes the princess, who was used in the previous film essentially just as the punchline to a raunchy joke, and promotes her to a main cast member. Seems like the reason they promoted the princess is that they wanted to work a bunch of relationship trouble into the plot line and kind of give him this work-home life balance conflict that he needed to work throughout the runtime of the film. But I just don't think it complemented the film, and so much of it just felt contrived, where he's in the middle of a spy mission and he's trying to seduce a person of interest, and he's calling his girlfriend to check in with her to make sure it's okay. It just feels so hollow, so forced, and the wrong way to take this franchise, which was always this over-the-top, escalated satire, kind of the James Bond movies, that took the excesses of those movies just as extreme levels as the punchline to jokes. And so then when you take the idea of our Bond-esque character, give him an actual girlfriend, but still have him seducing people, it just doesn't play right. Add to that, the movie's shockingly light on action for the first half of the film. There's just like one car chase sequence, and then you get a bunch of relationship trouble, and Harry's looking at butterflies, but people aren't punching each other in the face and heads aren't exploding. And this gets back to what I said at the very beginning about the movie just feeling like they picked the wrong direction to go in. It seems like by deciding to bring Harry back, they wrote themselves into a bit of a corner where they had to find this workaround plot line where the Kingsman couldn't bring him back because that wouldn't fit with the original film. So it had to be the Statesman. We have to work a plot line into which we get to that point in time. And it feels like they're just trying to put a bunch of pieces together that simply don't fit. It's also a movie I just don't think it in any way, shape, or form justifies a runtime of 2 hours and 20 minutes, which if you cut 30 minutes out of the first half of this film, then it's a nice quick moving action movie. But as is, it's very slow for the first hour, and then it picks up in the second half. But when we do get to the action in the second half of the film, it's just as stylized, just as energetic as in the first film. Matthew Vaughn knows how to bring action sequences to life and make them fun, quirky, and interesting. And of course, Elton John showing up, jump kicking people. That's just a fun thing to get to see in a movie. But when it comes to the story, the character arcs, the journeys that they're on, I just don't think it works. It's a movie that builds towards Eggsy's wedding, and when that happens, I just didn't care because it felt like such a strange plot line to put in this movie, such a strange direction to take things. So unfortunately, while the action is fun, the style is still there, I just don't think this movie works, and I don't enjoy it very much at all. Our runner-up, Kingsman: The Secret Service, and to be very clear, there's a big gap between Golden Circle and this film. I thoroughly enjoy this movie. Right out of the gate, this movie is stylized and clearly self-assured. It knows exactly what it's going for and how to capture it. From just the way that it does that intro zooming in shot to the use of Dire Straits in the soundtrack, and having tragedy in the intro while also having stylized ultra-violence, it just nails the tone right out of the gate. And that's what this movie does so well. There's such a distinct flavor to it. It has this high-class fashion with this schlocky ultraviolence while having kind of human emotion trickled inside of it. And it pulls all of that together in a much more cohesive fashion than immediately would make sense superficially speaking. It manages to take this idea of taking James Bond, taking it to its logical extremes, cranking it up to 11, but not falling into self-parody, and just nails that exact thing. And I think a big part of that is the cast. Of course, you get the star-making performance from Taron Egerton as Eggsy, but then I think the real magic here comes from Colin Firth as Harry, but it is that juxtaposition of this actor known for very different roles injected into this film for the purpose of bringing all the properness and sophistication of those other roles into a movie where people's heads explode and they make raunchy jokes.
Manners maketh man. Do you know what that means?
The other one that just kind of makes things work here is Samuel L. Jackson, who's just as much fun and has just as much charisma as ever, but adds more like quirky little details into it with the food that he eats, the lisp, all these details that just make the character a ton of fun. Now, the reason this one isn't at number one is because I feel like the middle act just stretches out too long at the training sequence. I wish that was like 10, 15 minutes shorter and there was an additional sequence of Harry, Roxy, and Eggsy out on a mission before what happens to Harry happens and we move into the final act of the film. And so that little change easily would have pushed this one up to that top spot because this was such a breath of fresh air, such an exciting entry into the franchise with such a wonderful, distinct style, with a world you wanted to explore more, characters you enjoyed, and very fun and interesting casting. But coming in first place for me is The Kingsman. Now, I understand that this movie didn't work for everyone. Some people didn't like the change of tone and direction and thought it was a little bit clunky. Fair enough if you felt that way, but
Agree to disagree.
for me, what I loved about this film was that it was a prequel that fleshed out the world while telling a standalone story. It does give the background for the Kingsman, but it doesn't waste its runtime answering questions I wasn't asking about where things came from in this universe. It's much more interested in telling the story about a family, about a man who has seen how awful war is, who realizes that World War I isn't a noble war, and he's desperately trying to stop it and save lives, most importantly, the life of his son. And because of that, it's a much more somber and poignant film than I was expecting going into it, that really kind of tugs at the heartstrings in ways that the first two films didn't even attempt. And that, to me, is what elevates this film. It is that father-son relationship. It is that central character that adds an extra layer to the film. Now, other fun details in here, it brings all the Kingsman's style to this revisionist history, this historic fan fiction with rewritten versions of Rasputin.
Time to dance on your graves.
Who can dance, fight, and all sorts of other wild, crazy characters. And some people might not sit well with them as they are dealing with real people that actually did horrible things and actually died. Understand, for me, I was able to buy into it, and I felt the mix of family drama with Kingsman style and historic fan fiction meshed together really nicely for something interesting, unique, that was a great addition to this franchise. And as I said before, whereas the first Kingsman I thought dragged a little bit in the middle, this one kept me interested and captivated from beginning to end. And in fact, in certain ways, the middle act was the most emotional of the entire bunch because of the journey of the son and how that sequence played out. And then, of course, you move into the third act and you get all the wild, crazy Kingsman fun. And once again, with Ralph Fiennes, similar to Colin Firth, it's just really fun to see these dignified actors in these over-the-top action movies doing these wild and crazy sequences. And that was just as much true here. as it was with Colin Firth in the first film. So for me, this is an example of a prequel that found a way to stand on its own while building out the world and telling a compelling, interesting, exciting story that had all the stuff you want from a Kingsman movie while adding in some new layers of emotion. I get it. Some of you didn't like the change of direction, and I can see how this movie would be very clunky for some people, but I was able to buy into the journey of the lead character, his connection to his son, his worldview, his desire for pacifism driving so many of his actions. Therefore, for me, this one just clicked and resonated more than the first film, and certainly a lot more than the second film, so it comes in at number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more just like it. Check out that video right over there. I don't even know what YouTube's recommending to you right now. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.